48 years ago, a young woman's life was cut short when she was bludgeoned to death in her own apartment. Today, the murder of 23-year-old Jane Sanders Britton remains unsolved. The Harvard grad student Needham native's body was discovered in January of '69, partially covered by a rug and a fur coat in her apartment where she lived alone. Nothing was stolen, and a red powder was scattered around the room. There were a lot of theories about what happened to Britton, but police never even named a suspect. Now, almost a half-century later, former reporter Michael Widmer is delving back into the case, along with former New Yorker journalist Becky Cooper. I'm joined now by Mike Widmer, who worked for United Press International at the time of Britton's murder. More recently, of course, he led the Mass Taxpayers Foundation. Good to see you, Mike. We're also joined by Middlesex District Attorney Marianne Ryan, whose office has jurisdiction in this case. District Attorney, it's good to see you too. And Boston Globe investigative reporter Todd Wallach, who recently wrote a piece about the mystery and the battle to get more information. He's the recipient of the 2016 National Pulliam First Amendment Award for his great reporting of the state's then weak public records law. It's not so strong now either, but it's better than it was. Good to see you. Let me start with you. Is this your first assignment for UPI as a cub reporter?
Day 2. Why
do you care about this 48 years later?
Well, it was a formative experience for me. I'm spending several years on the Harvard campus in graduate school. I completed the degree. Then I'm hired by UPI. Day 2, back in Cambridge, back in Harvard, where I was right around the corner from Cronin's, where I'd been many, many times. And there's a murder of a Harvard graduate student. So it really has always been part of me. Always wanted to go back, mainly because it's unsolved. What happened?
And to get it solved, you've sought information from her, who would be district attorney, and not gotten it. What are you looking for?
Looking for some information 50 years later that can help describe what happened. And it seems to me totally appropriate. Initially, I had planned to write an article on this. But then Todd was doing a story, and then Becky Cooper from New York. So I've been working with them to try to, and frankly also, I think that if there's publicity on the case, that will actually help rather than hinder.
DA, why aren't you giving him and others who are looking for pretty basic information what they're looking for? Why don't you share it?
So one of the things that I'm really proud about, Jim, is that in the last 13 years, we have successfully prosecuted 4 cases that were in excess of 20 years old, one of them being 44 years old. So what that means is we were able to get to the resolution in those cases, but more importantly, in our true mission, that means there are 4 families that in the last 13 years, I'm sure, were in a position of thinking my case may never get solved. And we were able to bring those cases to resolution.
But they're the minority of so-called cold cases by a lot.
4 in 13 years is a lot.
But why aren't more eyes a better thing? As Mike Widmer said a minute ago, you still are the only one with official authority. Do your job, but with the eyes of smart people like him and Cooper. Why not do it that way?
Because one of the things that's very important, and to talk about one of those cases, 15-year-old John McCabe disappeared, didn't come home one night, 9 months after Jane Britton was murdered. His family couldn't find him. He was found the next day, hogtied and dead in a field. Took us 42 years to bring that case to resolution. And I bring that up because one of the things that was critical at that point, when we ultimately got some information that led us down a path to identifying a suspect, we were able to use information that had been held back, that was contained in those reports. It does 2 things.
To make sure this is the real deal.
It confirms it, and it also weeds out, really importantly, and I think something you'd be really interested in, it weeds out somebody, and we have this more often than we'd like to think, somebody who gives us a false confession. Because we had a very well-publicized case recently with a confession where they'd gotten that information from somewhere else.
Is she, I know you're not happy when public officials don't disclose what you think they have an obligation to, but is the DA here really aberrational? Isn't this, for the most part, what law enforcement officials do, is keep it, I'm not defending it, but it is what it is, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. Particularly in Massachusetts, law enforcement officials tend to withhold a lot of records that would be public in other places or people argue would be public. For instance, the Worcester District Attorney is withholding records on a 66-year-old murder case from 1951 where the state police have acknowledged that the prime suspect died in prison years ago and they're not actively pursuing any new leads.
But get back to Middlesex. Is there anything that she's doing that's particularly grievous in your estimation?
Well, what some people have noticed is the state supervisor records, who's charged with overseeing public records appeals, has pointed out that Marion Ryan could release some of the records or redact some of the records. For instance, some of the information in the records was given out to reporters at the time and widely shared.
So as Todd knows, because we invited him over, we had a long conversation about this, is the supervisor of records has not ordered us to turn them over, right? Where we stand right now is they're going to take a look at some of those records.
Forget being ordered. Why wouldn't you do it voluntarily? Because, as Todd said, some things that won't jeopardize an investigation.
In this matter, we have some ongoing DNA testing.
Well, you have done DNA testing since 2006.
Well, we have some ongoing testing.
And now it's suddenly, after all of this furor, you're doing testing.
No, I beg to differ because Todd knows, certainly when he was in our office in February, he knew that testing was in process.
But isn't it true you announced the new testing the day after his article appeared?
No, Todd and I talked in February, and I'm sure he can confirm this. When we told him at that time, we were working through getting to the testing.
Let me hold. His head is about to pop off. Let's hear it.
That's also because I'd started filing Freedom of Information requests. I've now filed 5. And 5 supervisor record responses have said they should release something.
I don't even know what active means. What's the state of your investigation?
Well, right now we're doing this testing at the lab. It is our hope, given, obviously DNA testing wasn't available in 1969. This is certainly much more sophisticated, sensitive testing. It is our hope that we will be able to develop a DNA profile.
And if you can't develop a DNA profile, will you then release information requested by the Widmers and the Coopers and the Wallachs and the others?
If we cannot develop a DNA profile, and that leaves us at a place with no viable option, we're careful to point out this case will never be closed in terms of would we pursue it and bring
but I mean, as a practical
in terms of the FOIA request, yes, we may be at that point.
By the way, is anybody getting anywhere? I mean, you're not going to tell me whether you're getting anywhere, I assume, other than what you've said. Are you getting anywhere? Is anybody getting anywhere on this thing or no?
I don't know. I've talked to Becky now and again.
Are you getting anywhere?
No, not really.
So your interest
that was good. I didn't have to FOIA that. I got that information.
But my sense is, I mean, Becky's writing this book.
I understand.
And I've been
she left the New Yorker to write the book about this case.
And so forth. And so she has done some very serious interviewing of all sorts of people. So I don't know where she's.
Are there any family members or people? I mean, this isn't that long. I mean,
yes, there still are families.
Are there still people who care about this?
There's a brother who's frustrated that.
With whom?
With Marion Ryan's office, that they're not sharing more information because he would very much like it solved.
I think his frustration, as with all families in these cases, is the fact that there is no resolution. We haven't been able to get to that point. And the other piece that's important to remember is all of us could probably take a look at material in these cases and have a theory about who did it. That's not my charge. My charge is to identify someone who I have probable cause to arrest and who I can sustain the burden beyond a reasonable doubt for prosecution. Because reading it and saying, I think it's Jim who did it, that's interesting. But it doesn't. I understand.
Whitey Bulger wouldn't
right
be in jail, as you know that, if it turns out that a U.S. attorney hadn't decided that, or the FBI maybe hadn't decided that. Let's get more eyes on this case.
Oh, exactly.
And actually, there were some eyes in Iceland that helped resolve this.
And often I do that. Just last week, you might have seen, I was out asking the media for help with the Charlene Holmes and uncharged shooting. So when we have something that people can identify, we're out there. In the last year, I've made at least 5 public attempts to ask the media. Certainly the Bella Bond case is a good example.
Okay, but let's stop here. What's your point here?
Well, my point is I want to pick up on what Todd said. In Massachusetts, standard form for the DAs to release nothing. This isn't true everywhere in the country. And when you're talking about a 48-year-old case, come on.
Okay, so can we end with this? We're running out of time. Would you at least consider, while this DNA profile that you hope is going to come together is pending, to at least release something to the Coopers, Wallachs, and Widmers that you think doesn't jeopardize your ability to solve this thing?
Where I am right now is I expect to know whether we can develop a DNA profile within 4 to 6 weeks.
At the end of which you will make a decision about sharing information.
Yes.
Mike Widmer, thanks so much. It's great to see you in a new persona.
Yes, exactly.
DA, thank you so much for your time. And Todd, you as well.
seeing you
Really
again.
appreciate it. Thanks so much.